The rapid growth of world's population over the past 100 years resulted from a difference between the rate of birth and the rate of death. The human population will increase by 1 billion people in the next decade. This is like adding the whole of population of China to the world's population. The growth of human population around the world affects all people through its impact on the economy and the environment. The current rate of population growth is now a significant burden to human well-being. Understanding the factors which affect population growth patterns can help us plan for the future. The purpose of this unit is to examine some important factors about overpopulation. This unit addresses the definition of overpopulation, the causes of rapid population growth, the consequences of rapid population growth, and the actions and strategies that can be developed to solve problems caused by overpopulation. The purpose of this lesson is to illustrate the concept of population growth, definition of overpopulation, causes and consequences of overpopulation. In the past, infant and childhood deaths and short lifespans used to limit population growth. In today's world, thanks to improved nutrition, sanitation and medical care, more babies survive their first few years of life. The combination of a continuing high birth rate and a low death rate is creating a rapid population increase in many countries in Asia, Latin America and Africa, and people generally lived longer. Overpopulation is defined as the condition of having more people than can live on the earth in comfort, happiness and health, and still leave the world a fit place for future generations. What some people now believe that the greatest threat to the future comes from the overpopulation. How long did it take for the world population to increase by 1 billion? This visualization provides an additional perspective on population growth. The number of years it took to add 1 billion to the global population. Also shown in this figure is the number of years projected up to 11 billion based on the UN's medium variant projection. The graph shows how the population growth rates has changed dramatically through time. It wasn't until 1803 that the world reached its first billion. It then took another 124 years to reach 2 billion. By the third billion, this period has reduced to 33 years. Reduced further to 15 years to reach 4 billion. The period of fastest growth occurred through 1975 to 2011, taking only 12 years to increase by 1 billion for the 5th, 6th and 7th. The world has now surpassed this peak rate of growth, and the period between each billion is expected to continue to rise. It is estimated to take approximately 13 years to reach 8 billion in 2024 and further 14 years to reach 9 billion in 2038, 18 years to reach 10 billion in 2056 and further 32 years to reach the 11th billion in 2088. 200 years ago, the world population was just over 1 billion. Since then, the number of people on the planet grew more than 7-fold to 7.7 billion in 2019. How is the world population distributed across regions and how did it change over this period of rapid global growth? Most people always lived in Asia. Today it is 60%. 200 years ago it was 68%. If you want to see the relative distribution across the world regions in more detail, we can switch to the relative view. The world region that saw the fastest growth over the last 2 centuries was North America. The population grew 31-fold. Latin America saw the second largest increase with 28-fold. Over the same period, the population of Europe increased 3-fold. In Africa, it is 14-fold and Asia, it is 6-fold. The distribution of the world population is expected to change significantly over the 21st century. Both death rates and birth rates have fallen, but death rates have fallen faster than birth rates. There are about 3 births for each death, with 1.6 births for each death in more developed countries, which we call it as MDCs, and 3.3 births for each death in less developed countries, which we call it as LDCs. The world's population continues to grow by 1 billion people every dozen years. On one hand, some politicians call for countries, especially the most developed countries, to increase their population size to maintain their economic growth and military security. On the other hand, critics denote that 1 out of 5 people living there today is properly supported and believe that the world is already limited in resources. These critics maintain that slowing world population growth is one of the most urgent issues. Those who believe that the world is overpopulated argue that if we do not sharply lower birth rates, we are raising death rates by default. Until recently, birth rates and death rates were about the same, keeping the population stable. People had many children, but a large number of them died before age 5. During the Industrial Revolution, a period of history in Europe and North America where there were great advances in science and technology, the success in reducing death rates was attributable to several factors: increase in food production and distribution, improvement in public health, that is water and sanitation, and medical technology, that is the incoming of vaccines and antibiotics, along with the gains in education and standards of living within many developing nations. Without these attributes present in many children's lives, they could not have survived common diseases like measles or the flu. People were able to fight and cure deadly germs that once killed them. In addition, because of the technology, people could produce more and different kinds of food. Gradually, over a period of time, these discoveries and inventions spread throughout the world, lowering death rates and improving the quality of life for most people. The remarkable facts about the last 150 years have been the ability of farmers to increase food production geometrically in some places. Agricultural practices have improved in the United States in the last 2 centuries. Much of the world experienced agricultural success, especially in the last 50 years. Between 1950 and 1984, for example, the amount of grain harvested worldwide increased from 631 billion tons to 1.65 billion tons. This represents a gain of 2.6 times at a time when the world population increased by only 1.9 times. In more recent years, the technology has produced a broader variety of techniques, new kinds of seeds, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and more sophisticated machinery. The use of technology has made possible the rapid expansion of agriculture in the United States and other most developed countries and less developed countries. The use of pesticides in LDCs, that is less developed countries, for example, was expected to increase between 400 to 600% in the last 25 years of the 20th century. During the past 10 years, the world's food production has increased by 24%, outpacing the rate of population growth. However, this increase was not evenly distributed throughout the world. For example, in Africa, food production decreased while population increased, and world cereal production fell in 1993 according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, which predicted a food shortage in 20 countries during 1994. However, most experts agreed that there is no shortage of food and that equitable distribution should be sufficient to meet all needs for the future. Lack of money to buy food is the problem of malnourishment. Poverty in effect translates the word adequacy into national and local shortages. Within households, men and boys have priority for whatever food is available, while women and children, especially girl children, are the first to suffer malnutrition. Few resources are available to women, even though they are often responsible for the food supply. People have concerns about survival daily living, such as meeting basic needs, food, water and housing. First, access to safe drinking water was related to the incidence of epidemic diseases such as cholera and child survival. Less than 50% of population had access to safe drinking water before 1990. By 1990, access to safe drinking water had increased by 75%. But between 1990 and 2000, the numbers of people without access to safe water are projected to increase. An increasing number of countries, both developed and developing, are approaching the limits of sustainable water use based on their own renewable resources. Second one, the pressure to provide adequate housing increases as the population grows. More than half of the developing world's population will be living in urban areas by the end of the century. This growth outstrips the capacity to provide housing and services for others. In some countries, finding a place to live is hard, especially for women. Some women and children are forced to live in the poorest community where they are open to exploitation and abuse. The priorities for getting rid of poverty, improving food supply, ending malnutrition and providing adequate housing coincide at all points with those required for balanced population growth. The biggest population story of the last 100 years has been the conquest of disease. Scientists have learned a great deal about the ways to prevent and cure many types of diseases. Thus, millions of people who would have died of diseases a century ago are more likely to live to old age. The most effective tools in the conquest of disease have been improved knowledge about nutrition, vaccinations, better public health practices and the development of new medicines. In the late 80s, a baby born in Iceland was 32 times more likely to live to the age of 1 year old as a baby born in Afghanistan. The major reason for this large difference in survival rate is nutrition. When young children get enough of the right kinds of food, they are likely to live to be adults. In many nations, the people know about proper nutrition for young children and adults. Unfortunately, in many less developed countries, the people lack the money and skills that would allow them to use the knowledge about nutrition they already have. As a result, infant death rates and therefore overall death rates remain high in the less developed countries. The second most important factor is vaccinations. As far back as 1800, scientists knew how to use vaccines to protect people from infectious disease. Use of that knowledge has reduced the rate of disease like influenza, smallpox, polio and rubella in most developed countries. Again, lack of resources has prevented many less developed countries from making similar use of vaccination to reduce the rate of infectious disease and death rates in their countries. Moreover, vaccines are still not available for some diseases like malaria is the most obvious example and the greatest concern in less developed countries. The third one, better public health practices. The germ theory of disease discovered by Louis Pasteur in the 1870s clearly demonstrated that a person's health was also a community problem. Sewage dumped into a public water supply could cause disease throughout the community. With this understanding, the science of public health was born. Today's public health measures like waste treatment, water purification, vaccination and nutritional education are well developed in most developed countries. However, public health measures are still absent in many less developed countries. As a result, disease continues to spread and cause high death rates. And finally, with the advent of new medicines, disease was less of a problem in most developed countries because of medical science has invented a whole range of new medicines with which to treat everything from infections to pneumonia. Progress in medical sciences has therefore had a great effect on the population of most nations of the world. Nearly everywhere death rates have fallen. At the same time, birth rates, at least in the less developed countries, have remained high. These combinations of high birth rates and low death rates have led to population explosion in many countries throughout the world. The end of the population explosion worldwide will be determined by how much countries invest in family planning efforts to lower fertility and slow down population growth. Different populations grow at different rates around the world. This depends on how many children families have and the number of years someone is expected to live. The population of many countries in Asia, Africa and Latin America are growing the fastest, especially where large families are still important. These poorer, less developed countries tend to have shorter lives and higher infant death rates. When couples know some of their children may die, they choose to have more. However, many couples wish to limit family size but lack the information and means to make these choices. Rapid human population growth has a variety of consequences. Population grows fastest in the world's poorest countries. High fertility rates have historically been strongly correlated with poverty and high childhood mortality rates. Falling fertility rates are generally associated with improved standards of living, increased life expectancy and lowered infant mortality. Overpopulation and poverty have long been associated with increased death and disease. People tightly packed into unsanitary housing are inordinately vulnerable to natural disasters and health problems. However, most of the world's, that is 1.2 billion desperately poor people live in less developed countries. Poverty exists even in more developed countries. 1 in 5 Soviet citizens reportedly lives below the country's official poverty line. In United States, 33 million people, 1 in 8 Americans are below the official poverty line. The rapid expansion of population size observed since the end of World War II in the world's poorest nations has been a cause of their poverty. Poverty is a condition of chronic deprivation and need at the family level. Poverty is a major concern of humankind because poverty everywhere reduces human beings to a low level of existence. Poor people lack access to enough land and income to meet basic needs. A lack of basic needs results in physical weakness and poor health. Poor health decreases the ability of the poor to work and put them deeper into poverty. Rich and poor countries alike are affected by population growth, though the population of industrial countries is growing more slowly than those of developing one. At the present growth rates, the population of economically developed countries would double in 120 years. The third world, with over 3/4 of the world's people, would double its numbers in about 33 years. This rapid doubling time reflects the fact that 37% of the developing world's population is under the age of 15 and entering their most productive childbearing years. In the third world countries, excluding China, 40% of the people are under 15. In some African countries, nearly half are in this age group. The world's current and projected population growth calls for an increase in efforts to meet the needs for food, water, healthcare, technology and education. In the poorest countries, massive efforts are needed to keep social and economic conditions from deteriorating further. Any real advances in well-being and the quality of life are negated by further population growth. Many countries lack adequate supplies of basic materials needed to support their current population. Rapid population growth can affect both the overall quality of life and the degree of human suffering on earth. Now, let us discuss the effects of overpopulation in brief. First one, exhaustion of natural resources. The main effect of overpopulation is the unequal and unrestrained use of resources. The planet has a limited capacity to generate raw materials, and each year the natural resources deficit. The consumption of the resources at a faster rate than the planet is able to generate them is reached earlier. Consequently, in developing countries, overpopulation causes fierce rivalries to control resources. Territorial conflicts over water supply are due in many cases to geopolitical tensions and can end in war. Next cause of overpopulation, that is environmental degradation. Unbridled use of natural resources as well as growth in energy production from coal, oil and natural gas, which we usually call as fossil fuels, is having a negative impact on the planet. Consequences number: on the one hand, deforestation and desertification, extinction of animal and plant species and changes in the water cycle, and the most direct consequence of all in the form of emissions of large quantities of greenhouse gases leading to global warming. Then the next one is the rising unemployment. On the other hand, a high number of workers exist for a limited number of vacancies, and this seems destined to lead to high rates of joblessness in the future. This in turn could provoke rising crime and social revolt. The other consequence is rising living cost. All the above will lead to an end of the day to increasing living cost in most countries. Fewer resources, less water, the packing of many people into confined spaces and lack of money are provoking an increase in the cost of living, whereby only a percentage of the population will be able to cover all their needs. And the next one, the technological advances. On the positive side, high concentration of people in urban areas also brings with it research and development in the quest for solution to the population's need. An example is the popularization of communication technologies and the generation, collection and use of big data for sustainable ends, as well as the emergence of smart cities adapted to ensure good living condition for the increasing population. The depopulation of rural areas in favor of cities may paradoxically create major challenges for such places. It results in a growing number of underutilized infrastructures due to migration away from these rural areas and previously domesticated landscape whose ecosystems deteriorate without human attention. There is a controversy over whether population growth is good or bad. Overpopulation and continuing population growth rate are making substantial contribution to the destruction of Earth's life support systems. In the past, human populations have rarely been subject to explosion. The powerful long-term momentum that is built into the human age structure means that the effects of fertility changes become apparent only in the future. For these reasons, it is now conventional practice to use the technology of population projection as a means of better understanding the implication of trends. Action plans and strategies can be developed to increase public understanding of how rapid population growth limits chances for meeting basic needs. The spirit of open communication and empowerment of individual women and men will be key to a successful solution to many population problems. Collective vision about healthcare, family planning and women's education at community level build a basis for action. The creation of action plans help to meet challenges to find cooperative solutions. Individual choice, human rights and collective responsibility are key to allowing families to plan the size and spacing their children. It is essential to achieve a balance between population and available resources. Teachers, parents, community workers and other stakeholders should extend the range of choices about available resources to individuals, especially women, and by equalizing opportunities between the genders from birth onwards. Teachers, students, parents and other stakeholders can look for trends in the population explosion. They can hold community meetings at schools to discuss how this issue presents a challenge to the big picture of human population on the planet Earth. Overpopulation is an undesirable condition where the number of the existing human population exceeds the actual carrying capacity of the Earth. Overpopulation is caused by a number of factors: reduced mortality rate, better medical facilities, depletion of precious resources are a few of the causes which result in overpopulation. It is possible for a sparsely populated area to become densely populated if it is not able to sustain life. Growing advances in technology with each coming year has affected humanity in many ways. One of these has been the ability to save lives and create better medical treatment for all. A direct result of this has been the increased lifespan and the growth of the population.